folks, Roger B here. I was going to do an update on my iFlight iX5 build video. This video will focus on more of the Asgard setup that I used for that all-in-one PDB speed controller. Speed controller and flight controller. Some tips there are for the OSD. OSD was pretty straightforward. I did use the video in, that went to the camera, ground went straight to the camera. Video out and ground went to the video transmitter. So if you look here, the video transmitter's at the top, the PDB's at the Asgard's at the bottom. So there's that white is a signal, and ground are very short wires that go straight to the little pads here for video out and ground, and the video in and ground are this yellow and black wire going to the camera, and then the 5 volt going from the video transmitter directly to the camera, a very short wire there. So that's the camera setup. But other things about the Asgard setup are the Spectrum receiver. So there were rumors that UART 6 wasn't working for Spectrum. I don't know if that's true or not, but I figured why take a chance. So what I did was I used UART 1, the RX1 up here for the Spectrum. So that's where the Spectrum gray wire goes. But the Spectrum takes 3.3 volts. So for the Spectrum power, I ran that down here to these two pads here for the +5 and ground for the Spectrum power. You need to see this on the bottom. So the gray wire is over there on the RX1, but then I just took power and ground from the two pads on the right. That's the orange and the black. Orange is the 3 volt. There was a trick that you had to do with this jumper here. So you'll see 3 solder blobs on the board, and so it looks like that nothing is jumpered. However, from the factory, 5 volt was jumpered. I had to take my knife and scrape between the middle pad and that 5 volt pad. I had to scrape that right there. I took my knife, scrape to break a trace that was going from the middle to the 5 volt. So once I broke that trace, this power became unpowered. And then a little blob of solder to go from that J19 center to the 3, then heated this back up to 3 volts. And so that's the 3 volts that's going to the Spectrum. So that was a trick there that you had to play for that is cutting that trace. Finally, the Asgard, when you plug in the USB, that is also giving low power to the ESCs. So good news, bad news. Good news is you can use the BL Heli without actually plugging in your battery and read and write a BL Heli setup without having to plug in main power. The bad news is you can't calibrate your ESCs. So I really don't recommend trying to use one-shot or multi-shot. You're pretty much now forced to use D-shot with the Asgard flight controller ESCs. D-shot does not require ESC calibration, so that's why you can get away with that. I usually run multi-shot, but in this case, this is my first build using D-shot 600. So it is configured using D-shot 600, and I did do what was recommended here is you want to use the J_H_25 firmware when you are flashing the new BL Heli. So I flashed BL Heli 16.65 firmware onto the ESCs, and in Betaflight I used the latest Betaflight 3.1.7 and used D-shot 600. Test flew just fine. Motors are nice and cool with mostly default settings. So I hope that it gives some of the tips that I did with the Asgard setup. Maybe another little tip, that the pads where you solder the pigtail, I use liquid black tape to cover those up because those are huge pads. I'd hate for you to short something out with a finger or whatever with the battery plugged in. So I did the battery leads on the bottom, and those battery leads come out and get strain relief there tied to the post. And then I actually used the top. You'll see these two little thin wires coming off the top of those two pads, and those two wires are actually going directly to the video transmitter to provide power to the video transmitter. If you have any questions, just post them up on Facebook and we'll get answers to you.